to the Hell and Back meeting of Cocaine Anonymous. My name is Michelle, and I am an addict. Are there any other addicts present? Welcome. Please help me open this meeting with a moment of silence, followed by the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Cocaine Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from their addiction. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop using cocaine and all other mind-altering substances. There are no dues or fees for membership, but we are fully self-supporting through our own contributions. We are not allied with any other sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. We do not wish to engage in any controversy, and we neither endorse nor oppose any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay free from cocaine and all other mind-altering substances and to help others achieve the same freedom. In accordance with the seventh tradition stating that we are fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions, we will now pass the baskets. The mission of the Sunday night to Hell and Back speaker meeting of Cocaine Anonymous is to carry a strong message of recovery, hope, and spirituality to those who may not be in a position to receive such a message easily. To Hell and Back does this by recording the speakers every week. Proceeds of the CD sales at this meeting go towards the duplication of these recordings and their distributions free of charge to halfway houses, treatment facilities, and other institutions. If you would like to make a contribution to this cause or purchase recordings of any of our speakers, please see our CD chairperson after the meeting. At this meeting, we read the 12 steps adapted from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and tonight I have asked Joe to read.
Hi, my name is Joe. I'm a cocaine addict. Joe. I'm not sure I can see well enough to read these. We admitted we were powerless over cocaine and all other mind-altering substances, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message out to addicts and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
Thank you. At this meeting, we record our speakers. Please turn off all cell phones. Also, the chairs in this room are very loud, so please keep the movement in the room to a minimum out of respect for the speaker and the recording taking place. And I've been asked if there are any people that came in later and are sitting around by the door or in the back, if you'd like to come sit down in the front, if so you can hear and see better, that would be nice. So if anybody would like to come sit right in the front here. I'd like to introduce Joe. Joe is he's a person who helps a lot of people in our fellowship, and he helps them through helping them to recognize their experience in this fellowship, and he helps a lot of people, and so please help me welcome Joe.
Thank you for having me. Like I I said, I'm Joe. I'm a cocaine addict. I always got to try and remember what fellowship I'm in. I'm blessed to belong to a number of them. And I really enjoy Cocaine Anonymous, particularly this group who I'm getting more and more to know, because the future of all 12-step recovery is sitting in this room. And it's so important that there's people here that are seeking spiritual growth and doing so in an effort to become more useful to others. And it's very meaningful to me to see that. When I came to 12-step recovery, I desperately needed 12-step recovery, and I was 27 years old. And if any of you met me coming in here, you can see that I have aged a bit. And one of the things you learn in 12-step recovery is that time goes on a lot longer than we suspect. And life presents complexities that I didn't know were going to come. In sobriety, I had an idea by the time I arrived in 12-step recovery rooms that once I stopped using, my life would straighten out. And to some degree, that was true, but I still was very uncomfortable. And as I've had time to grow in it, I realized that I had been uncomfortable most of my life. I was born into a family where expectations of me were great. I was not. I meet people a lot of times in 12-step recovery that I can see why they ended up in the circumstances they did based on the way they were raised, the circumstances they were confronted with. But I don't have any such excuse. And I'm not saying what they're saying is an excuse. All I'm saying is it's understandable for some of the abuses some people have had. I didn't come from that. I came from a family of the political class, solidly upper middle class. They were. I had a grandfather who was a senator. I had another grandfather who was a sheriff. My father was a business manager for a construction organization. My mother a school teacher. There was an expectation I was going to go to college. I was going to achieve in all the worldly ways that probably many of you are familiar with too. And I never had any reason to doubt it, but I was never comfortable in the role. And it wasn't because I wasn't treated right, I just was never comfortable. So by the time I was probably 10 years old, that was the first time I was hospitalized for an alcoholic overdose. And I should have perhaps known that was a omen of sorts, that things were not going to go well with me and substances. But I'm not one of those people who graduated into addiction. I don't remember ever wanting to use anything I used any other way than full out. If there was ever anything laid out, I was down, and whatever you had was good, and that's what I wanted. I wanted no limits. And so I didn't have any idea. For the longest time, I was able to pull that off. I was able to go on to school, go on to college, do those things, and I engaged in all those activities, and those activities defined me. They really defined who I was. And the problem with allowing those activities of, the behavior that goes with drugs and alcohol and all the rowdiness that it entailed, the problem with that is I always thought that I was a better person. I didn't mean all that stuff. When I'd get into fights, since I didn't mean anything by it. I was trying to pretend to be something I wasn't. And pretty soon I realized that I was a good enough actor. People believed me. And they didn't like having me around. And they didn't, they were uncomfortable with my presence. And the problem there was I also had other things I wanted to achieve worldly, and they never knew which one was going to show up. So by the time I was in college, I managed to get on 2 lists at the same time. The Dean's List for imminent expulsion and the Dean's List for academic excellence. And that's very confusing because anytime anyone points to one, I would just deflect to the other, depending on which crowd I was trying to hang with. Early on in recovery, I tell this story frequently and I always hesitate to tell it, but it is funny. It gives you an idea. I started losing jobs early in recovery. Probably the best job I ever had was as a night host in a woman's dormitory. And that's an outstanding job for a guy like me. And the role was to go in at midnight and then just open the door for the women as they came home from the clubs and what have you, and see to it they got to their apartments safely. And so I'm up in Flagstaff going to school at this time, and preparation for a midnight starting time for me involved, smoking things and drinking things and doing things to prepare for a long, cold night. So one particular evening, we decided after a whole bunch of other things that we were going to do flaming shots. And we were on a beer budget, which most college students are. But what we did have that would light on fire was 151 rum. Now, you guys may have some familiarity with 151 rum, but those of you who do not, if you ever decide to do flaming shots and you decide to use 151 rum, the immediate discovery that I had was that it does not go out simply because I put it in my mouth. And I discovered that after I'd put it in my mouth. So what then happened is it started oozing out of my mouth and down my chest, and I had shoulder-length hair, typical of young men in the late 70s, and that stuff just went up in a ball of flame. So now I'm sitting there, a ball of flame, in a room full of very high people. And another discovery I had at that moment was that a man on fire is hilarious to a bunch of people who are high and not on fire. And so I wasn't getting any help getting put out. And eventually someone threw me a towel. I put me out. By that time I was blistered and my hair was, all the way to the quick, nappy looking. No, it was not pretty. And so by that time it's also time to go to work. And so because I had no idea what I looked like, I don't know if any of you guys have ever had a booking photo and then looked back and realized that you didn't look quite like you thought you might have looked. I had no idea what I looked like, and it was in that condition I just described to you that I presented for work. So I'm sitting there, swelling, blistered, hair nappy looking, and sort of stuck to the scalp. And I knew I wasn't going to stay awake. So what I did was I propped myself up behind the desk. I left the door open. I figured the gals would just come in and get themselves in, and all would be good. And what ended up happening is they came in, saw what I looked like, and they called the police because they thought I'd been beat up. And the police came to investigate, and it didn't take them long to find out that there was something else in play. And the problem I also have when I'm really inebriated is I have the capacity to be far more honest than it's good for me to be. And so I answered every question they had. And luckily, I told you the way I use drugs. I didn't have any illegal substances on me, but not because any planning on my part. I just had run out. It's the only reason I came to work. So anyway, that's how I ended up on the dean's list for imminent expulsion, and that's the first job I lost. And it didn't get any better. I went on through college. I found a job immediately where I could drink professionally, and I ran around the country drinking and doing cocaine and doing the things that you did. I mean, you had briefcases with mirrors in them. That's what you did then. It was the 80s, and it was crazy, early 80s. And so, anyway, fast forward, I ended up a wreck. I went through a family, and there was nothing wrong with them. It was just my selfish and inconsiderate habits, and ultimately it was just such a mess. I couldn't maintain it anymore, and so I ended up in the very first treatment that I had ever been in, and I don't know how many treatments anyone else has been in. I ended up going through lots of treatments, but in that particular treatment, they started me in this whole psychological approach that a lot of people use before they determine people like me don't respond well to psychological approaches. And I learned a lot about the disease of addiction and alcoholism. And I was pretty sure that self-knowledge would fix me, and so I went to the fellowship. And at the fellowship at that time, there was a lot of people in the same mindset, and they talked about triggers and things that I know. I hear people, because I've been in the behavioral health community, and I've worked in behavioral health, and I know those are useful psychological tools. They're just not very useful to the truly hopeless addict. I am one, and I don't know how many might be in any room I address, so I like to talk about what happened to me. I heard a plan about, preventing my relapse, thinking it through, those kinds of things, and all of that made sense to me, and it worked to some extent. I now know that what didn't happen for me is I never got the freedom that I got through the spiritual approach when I finally was broken enough to apply it. But what ended up happening is I did accumulate 10 years of continuous sobriety. And in that 10 years of continuous sobriety, I also accumulated a lot of worldly wealth. I had a construction company. Finally, at the end, I was operating in 13 states. I had hundreds of people jumping, stepping, and fetching to everything I wanted. And the problem with that for me is I thought I had done it. I didn't give any thought to the guy who had shown up in 1985 to 12-step recovery. And so by this time, I'm rolling and I'm thinking, I've come up with the secret and I've overcome it. And about 10 years in, about 1995, on my third or fourth $1 million that I was turning, and I only tell you that not to impress, because I'm not impressed by it, but to tell you how far addiction allowed me to go and how far that fall really was and what the journey back has been. Because sometimes I hear people talk about worldly things aren't important. Well, that's easy to say if you've never had any. But any of us that have ever had any and then lost all of them, we know that they do provide a certain level of comfort, since we do reside in the world. Yeah? So, anyway, I had all this going for me, and I was very uncomfortable, and I just decided that I knew how to find a little comfort. I was going to find some people I liked hanging out with more instead of those 12-step people, and I wandered into a bar room. And the only reason I like to tell that story is to tell you this. I was a contractor, which meant I was a professional negotiator. And I had a lot of knowledge of me as an addict. I knew what was going to happen. I had no reason to doubt what was going to happen. But I went in there and for $2 bought a beer. You would think as a professional negotiator, if I was going to negotiate my life away, I would have demanded more than a beer. I might as well have put the stock certificates of the company, all the vehicles, the housing, the titles, the relationships with my kids, my wives, all of that went. Just a matter of time. And it went really fast. I ended up in a opiate addiction along the way, industrial injury that led to me being able to do a lot of pain pills. And because I had 13 states to operate in, that meant I had 13 states worth of doctors to operate on. And again, it wasn't, things weren't as interconnected, and I wrote a lot of scripts, and I did all the things that any of you guys that have ever done any of that know. And then it gets to be completely unsustainable too, and so the only thing left to do is go to street opiates and things like that. And by this time, the company's crashed down, everything's gone, and this guy who came from this upper middle class family, this college educated guy, somewhere along the way I went to Cambridge, England, was schooled in Cambridge. I had a lot of advantages, and none of them stopped me from being a homeless guy on the street as a result of addiction. Nor did my experience in 12-step fellowship, 10 years of continuous sobriety, stop me from being a homeless guy on the street. And I don't know about any of you, but I came from a home that I was not equipped for homelessness. And it is a stark reality for those of us who find ourselves there. Anyway, I got insane to the point that I can readily say it was insane. I mean, we talk about alcoholic. I really didn't care if I ever had a place to go. If I don't have a place to go, I don't have to pay. If I don't, it's that old, only suckers pay rent mentality. My only issue was I had this parrot that went everywhere with me, it's hard, I would bounce from friends and relatives to my car. I managed to keep the car, and I managed to keep a job through all of this crap. But anyway, it's hard to find someone who'll take you in when you got a 20-inch parrot. And so one time when I'm in this house with this woman, and I'm sitting there, and I'm detoxing hard from opiates and alcohol, and I don't know how many of you have ever detoxed on alcohol, but I was in delirium tremens and not a little bit of the shakes. I mean, the whole, world of the spirit experience. There was some real weird stuff going on, and they were telling me to do not useful things, and the whole room full of people talking, and I remember going into her and saying, "Who are all these people, and why did you tell them to come here and not let me know?" And she says, "Joe, there is no one here." And I said, "Well, I would like for you to come out and explain that to them." Anyway, that's the guy I was. I only tell you that so I can tell you this. I went to many more detoxes. I laid in detoxes, absolutely dying. Knew I was dying, didn't care. As a matter of fact, people said, "Joe, you're dying," and I was like, "Tell me when. You don't tell me the crap I already know. Give me something useful." When would be a useful piece of information. And so I had no expectation that was ever going to change. And one more time I ended up in this detox. Actually, prior to getting to that detox, I went to my parents one more time. I don't know why they took me in. It's like this whole series of events that unfolded. But I went to my parents one more time, and they were just going to keep me for the day and then send me on my way because I was such a mess to have around. And I was detoxing on opiates and spinning on alcohol withdrawal, and my mother had pain pills, and so she was feeding me pain pills so it didn't get any worse. And I don't know who my opiate addict kindred spirits are here, but I was laying on the floor because I was trying to absorb some cool, and it was such a hard detox. But from that position on the floor, I looked up and I saw my parents' eyes. And for the first time ever, I didn't see judgment and condemnation in their eyes. I saw absolute terror. I was scaring them to death. And I was fully conscious of it. And what I didn't know then, but I know now, is when the miracle really started to unfold consciously for me. I turned my thoughts to another. I knew that no matter whatever else games I was playing, I couldn't do it to them anymore. I'd already proven I didn't care about me. I had written me off. But I couldn't keep doing this to them. And so I allowed them to drop me off at one more detox. And for me, it was just one more detox. And I went to this detox, and about 2 days in, I'm hard shaken, haven't been sleeping, and they got the meeting of the night. It happens to be a CA meeting. And this cat walks in, and I had been in recovery a long time. I'd been trying to get back to recovery a long time. I had never had the experience that this guy delivered. He was younger than I, but he walked in to that detox, and he didn't get into a lot of detail about circumstance. He got right into that 12-step book, that book of alcoholic experience, Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered. And he started talking about his experience out of that book in a useful way. And he talked about how he had been in Texas prison. And he talked about watching his father testify about how he had stolen to feed his cocaine habit, and how his father cried while he was testifying. And my parents never had to testify against me in court, but I had the experience. I could feel him talking to me about the experience of seeing that go on with someone you care about when you can't demonstrate how much you care. And I had the experience of lying to my parents and my wife and my kids, and lying to them and knowing they knew I was lying to them and being powerless to stop lying to them. And it was such a prostitution of my being. and I could connect to him. And then he started talking about an experiential God that he had found as a result of 12-step recovery, not a conceptual God. I think we make the mistake in 12-step recovery of talking to people about a God of their understanding, because that still puts me in my head where the main problem centers. But what our authors show us very clearly, and what this man showed me, is God in recovery is the subject of our experience, not the object of our belief. And if we can just be honest in the experience we're having, then we can get well through the power. The power dwells in each and every one of us. And he started showing me that what happens to us is our life gets to be calamitous. We get to thinking that either we're doing it all or someone else is doing it all or whatever, but we get these things that it blocks the consciousness of this power for good within us, and all we have to do is unblock it. And he said, you'll know that power still exists in you, Joe, as we go through the process. You'll know the grace you've already experienced. You'll know it as a feeling you have for a friend, the ability to converse freely with me, things you wouldn't talk to other people about. He talked to me about this experiential God. God the experience, not God the concept. So it made sense to me that then this process we enter into is to get to know better this power within me. Because what I learned in recovery, because of what he showed me and because of many experiences since, is that the world I live in is not the cause of how I think and feel. It is a reflection of how I think and feel. So anytime I'm disturbed in the world, I've got to learn to go inward and see what's going on with my relationship with Creator so that I can have a better time in creation. And that's a handy little trick to know in recovery when, if any of you are anything like me, I have some disturbing thoughts, even many years in recovery. I have some disturbing emotional experiences. And luckily what he showed me is once I got that consciousness unblocked, it taught me how to inventory those things that had been blocking my consciousness. The purpose of the 4-step inventory was not to tell everybody all the gnarly things I'd done. That's what I always thought. He says, no, this isn't for me to get to know you. I already know everything about you, Joe, because I got the signature of the Spirit when I talked to you. So I know whose kid you are. He says, now I want you to know whose kid you are. And he said, this inventory is not for me to know about you. It is for you to know about you. It is to properly arm you with the facts about you so that you can witness them consciously to others. The 3rd-step decision, as he walked me through it, is about entering into a process to learn about me so I can witness to you. And the process is always unfolding. As I witness to you about the power of God to restore me from whatever is going on, I receive healing power through me to you. And I don't even know what it is. I mean, he's told me about it. He says, what are your old ideas? I said, I don't know. He says, none of us know what our old ideas are. They just crop up. You don't know what you don't know. And I started looking at that. And I've walked in it a long time. I find out what my old ideas are when they present themselves. And I don't even know what they are until I see them reflected in you. I found out that it is virtually impossible through this process of inventorying. First, I had to learn to inventory actions. How did I act? But then I had to start looking at the condition, the state of being, the selfish condition I found myself in. When I'm in self-pity, how am I acting? What am I trying to gather unto me? Why am I not offering to others? That kind of thing. And what's the fear that drives that? I am driven by these fears that life was never going to change for me. That this is just all there was. I was driven by the fear that I was going to miss something. I don't know if any of you guys are drinkers, but that fear that I was going to miss something kept me sitting in bars with just me and the bartender for years. So sick. But I knew if I left, I was going to miss something. And it's the same fear to keep us in the dope house till the ghosts go home. You know what I mean? But the point is, all those things kept bottling up. And I looked at that and I realized as we went through this process and I started to grow in it, that, as I went out and started making approaches for amends and started talking to the people I had affected through my addiction, that as I witnessed to them with power, not so much about things I stole from them, which I did, things I stole from them, and not so much about the way I treated them, which I treated them in inconsiderate ways, but the spiritual gifts I took every time I let them down. When I would lie to the wives and spend all the money that we needed for the kids, they would survive that, but all the hope and all the trust and all the faith for a future just got zapped out of the room every time. And I was told I needed to go restore that, and I had to first acknowledge that had happened, and then I needed to continue to seek power to treat them in ways to restore that. I don't have the power to restore hope and trust. That's from a power greater than me. I don't even know what that looks like, that restoration. I know consistent action, treating you as you deserve to be treated, but I had a false idea of how people deserve to be treated until I started working around. And I didn't realize in that third step decision what I had decided was that I was going to let this power take over me. Which meant the minute I made that third step decision and entered into this manner of living, I gave up my right to be offended by anything you people did. You may not like that either. I still don't like it sometimes. But I cannot claim grace unless I'm an instrument of grace. That's why we say love and tolerance of others is our code. Love the people, tolerate the symptoms of your spiritual malady, just as I hope you'll tolerate mine when they manifest, and manifest they will. And the thing I also have learned in 12-step recovery is that I suffer a lot less from the way you treat me than I do about my thoughts of how you treated me. So what I have learned in 28 years of recovery, not continuous, but some long windows of continuous recovery, is the insanity of addiction always precedes the active addiction. And the reason I wanted a 12-step plan, a spiritual recovery plan, not a psychological recovery plan, is without consciousness of a power greater than me, when life gets difficult, I'm screwed. And what I have learned is this consciousness we speak of here is an awareness. Not just an awareness, but an awareness of being aware that there is a power in me that is overtaking me. And the more of me I let go, the more of the power takes over. And my nature is fundamentally different, even though my human thought processes and things still function. Just enough so I can see that Joe still exists, but Joe is letting go more and more. And what I learned in the process was that until I went through this active life of amends, which is the 12th step, a lot of people don't realize that. We make a lot of approaches to family members and things like that, trying to admit wrongs and try and teach them, through spiritual growth that we are changed and that this power changes, bearing witness that God took away my difficulties so that I may bear witness to His power. Most of us don't talk in King James language, so, I just tell them, when people say, man, you're sure doing a lot better, I got God, He sees to it, I do better. And when I do that, guys, it isn't because I'm trying to impress anybody, and it isn't because I want anyone to think something different of me. It doesn't win. It turns as many people off as it wins friends. But when I witness to you consciously about the power of God to restore, it comes with power. And one of the things that I've been taught about witnessing to this power that we call God in 12-step recovery is I cheat you to talk to you about that power without giving you a demonstration of the power. And so when I witness to you consciously, people will feel it. And I want to call to your attention, whatever you're feeling, whether I anger you or whether I inspire you, it isn't me doing it. Because only Spirit can touch Spirit. You understand? That's the Spirit stirring in you, and it's coming with the power coming from me. But it's not from me, it's from the power. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? And the more conscious you become, the more obvious it becomes. And I learned that from this guy out of the Texas prison I knew people that went to Texas prison. Perhaps some of you do. I know the kind of people they are. I know the kind of people that go to Arizona prison. I knew the kind of people who lived on the streets. I are one. But I had never, ever seen a guy coming out of the Texas prisons boldly profess the power of God to restore it. I'd never seen that embodied in the same man. And when that happened to me, it got my attention. And I knew that I would never be the same again as long as I could get that guy to show me how he found out what he knew. And I was right. I stayed in that process. I've been in that process. I witnessed to a lot of people the very same things I'm telling you, and I live a very different life today than I ever imagined I would. I don't have very much in the way of worldly things. I haven't in a long time. One of the things that happens when you do drink and drug yourself to homelessness is it does take a little while to reestablish relationships and get things back, and my drive isn't there anymore. My drive to worldly things isn't there anymore. If I can't be actively working with people just like you and like me, then I have to have that flexibility. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. A lot of people think, Joe, you look like you're stuck. And I said, no, I can show you stuck. Come down to the zone with me. I'll introduce you to some people I know. That's stuck. I've been stuck. What happened as a result of this process is I discovered that there is an ideal for me that is greater than I ever imagined. I have a guy I desperately want to be, and I fear I can't become that guy, but I ask for power and direction every day, all day, to be that guy. I hear silly things in the fellowship still. I'm just less judgmental about the fellowship. I still hear the guys in the back of the room my age saying, well, I ask him in the morning, keep me sober. And if I'm still sober, I thank him at night. I've never been so damn happy. And they don't look happy. And I think to myself, you know, that's not what I do. I read this book that these people wrote, and they suggested that I have an active life of discourse with this power within me so that I would learn to discern the difference between Joe and the power. And so that as I was asking for things in prayer, I was seeing it manifest. The power through me growing. And a lot of people aren't told that. When you first come into recovery, I don't know how many of you are new, but all of us, automatically when we come in here, if we just embrace it a little bit, we start learning. First of all, the power we're talking about isn't something we don't have worldly names for. The power is called love. But love is such radical power, and we have such a narrow definition of it. And so we don't realize how radical the power is until someone lays it on us. But when we come in here, we start experiencing it, and I see it right away with the new people. They couldn't make a commitment to anything. All of a sudden, they're making commitments, they're keeping commitments. They're seeing people behave really badly, and they're still helping them up. Oh, they're just an addict. And the power simply manifests through us. We've got to go out and prove it through the ministry of trying to help people, because as I take that terrible experience of all the people I hurt and all the wreckage I created, as I take that out and witness to another the power of God to restore through it as a result of my experience, my life is reclaimed. That's no longer baggage. The reason I don't regret the past is because every time something from the past comes up, as my emotional and mental states start to get wavering, I know I don't control them, I own them, but when I start to be unstable in my emotion or my thought life, I know that it's time to talk to somebody about what's going on with me. I've learned that process here, because it becomes obvious that I'm uncomfortable as a result of some past experience that's now needing to be amended. And when we get an opportunity then to witness to other people about that power, we learn that power proves through us to others. We get the power to love the unlovely, to tolerate the intolerable. Power flows through us. And that power, as it flows through us as vessels, changes us in some way. And I say us because I don't care who you are. If you're sitting here, you're being touched by the power, and it will change you in some way. It may take some time. One of the things that happens in recovery is sometimes it takes a while for it to take. But I'll guarantee you, if you get very much of this 12-step process, the fellowship may not touch you much, although it tends to, because there's some very loving people in the fellowship. But there is a power in you that has a yearning to make itself known to you, and what will happen eventually in 12-step recovery is even when we go out and use again, we don't get to do it with the same impunity that we once did. And if any of you have had that experience, you know I'm not lying to you. It gets less fun. And I don't know about you, I don't do anything for very long if it doesn't stay fun unless I can't stop. And I've had that experience. So what I have learned is I get to take this power out for a walk, and I get to work with a lot of people, and I get to go through the wreckage of my past with a certain amount of dignity. I have had some great experiences lately. My son just turned, well, he just turned 19 a while back. Anyway, he got messed up with heroin and a few other things, and luckily for him, because he ended up in jail for a long time. He just got sentenced to prison. But I, this hopeless addict, got to go testify on his behalf in his sentencing. The guy who showed up here couldn't have done that. I am grateful that he got arrested and put away, because when he was out running and doing that stuff, although I knew what he was doing and where he was doing it, I was able to live unconscious of it. It was an irresponsibility on my part, knowing what I knew. And I knew where he had learned it. You know what I mean? That's the thing. Powerless is not a theory, but as a parent, it's very difficult to watch it remanifest. But I went and sat with him every week at the jail, and we talked about God through the glass. And that's not his dad, and it's not him. And by the time he went to prison, he was, number one, glad to be getting to a yard, but he says, Dad, I was never going to stop on the street. If they hadn't locked me up, I'd be dead, or I'd be going down for longer. And he knew that. So anyway, he drew a pretty good stiff sentence. He's in a yard now. I'm getting ready to get to go see him. But what I have learned is that he's since taken his GED, and he's getting ready to start taking some college-level courses. Kid has a good intellect. There's no reason he can't do it, but he would have never done it on the streets. So this power knows what we need. And I've learned that, no matter how disturbing your circumstance or mine may look like, it is as it is. All is as it should be. All is well. Move into it with confidence. And it turns out okay. I just went through the cancer death of my mother, and probably the one human being on the planet I was closest to is my mother. So it's not easy to go through that. Everyone's got some affection for their mother, or most everyone, but we grew into a very tight friendship, and anyway, I witnessed her diminishing and finally passing away. And always my mother would tend to these flowers. She always had a garden, and then when her health got worse, she couldn't have the garden, so it got to be a table inside. But she would tend to these flowers, and she had 2 orchid plants that would never bloom again. They bloomed when we bought them for her, but they never bloomed again, and she just toiled right to the end. She was nearly dead, and she was still toiling over those plants, and they'd have the shoots, and she would say, the shoots are there, but they just won't bud. And we buried her last Saturday, and this week I went to pick up my father to go visit my brother up in Camp Verde, and when I walked into that room, my mom's orchids were blooming. Now, you can believe what you want to believe. You can ascribe to it anything you want. But what I will tell you is not something about resurrection, which I happen to believe in. But I will tell you this, that something about a life lived well enough that even when you know your own death is certain, you continue to cultivate a blossom for the people you leave behind. Something about that manner of living inspires me. I don't know what any of us might do on this planet. But I know that if I will act in this radical power of love, with random acts of kindness, without any expectation, the best my human nature will allow, if I'll just do it, hoping for something to sprout, the promise is someone will enjoy it. And the lesson in that is I tried to gather unto me, and I didn't enjoy it. I have found through this process that there is a way to find a sense of ease and comfort in the world without going out in the world to get it. The power is found within us. It's experiential. I have had very difficult times. I told you I watched my mother die. I've watched another friend of mine die. I've watched my son go to prison. I watch all of this stuff and I feel responsibility for it, and it's deeply painful stuff. And in all of that, there's nothing out there going to fix it. I have to go inward. And I have to press in and find that comfort from wherever. And the place I get the most comfort is when I get to talk to a room full of people a lot like me. You know, one of the things we sometimes get a sense of in recovery is that there's some kind of class system, but there really is not. There's no superiority here. All we've got in 12-step recovery is some of us that have a little more experience in the path, and we are honored to show people what we've been shown. The power within you will reveal to you at the pace it does. I have no more power to invoke a healing in you than I had to invoke one in me. But what I do have is the power to witness to you how that was done for me. And if you invite it in, I have absolute assurance that that'll happen for you. And if you encourage others consciously, I have every assurance that'll happen for them. And so then we see great things come to pass for us and countless others in the vision, right? Just like the author said. I got a guy I worked with years ago. I picked him up in Sunny Slope the first time. He's a musician, a professional musician. And I love to track his sobriety. He's still on the charts in Texas and doing good. But one time he called me from over in Texas, and he had coming up on a, 6th or 7th anniversary, and he said, Joe, so-and-so just called me. He said he was out and he was having a good time. He said, why did he tell me that? And my mind immediately went right into Joe human mode. You know, I wanted to tell him because he's an asshole, and, But, that's not right. It's just unconscious behavior. And so I did what we're taught here. I paused. And I asked for direction, and words came out of me that were not of me. I said, do you really want to know why he told you that, or do you want to know if it's true? See, it's always got to go inward. It's not about answers. I have no answers for you. But if we sit down one-on-one, I have questions for you. The same ones that stimulated an answer in me. He answered me back. He goes, oh, I want to know if it's true. And he says, I know it's not true. And so then disaster is averted, because we have the discovery of learning the truth and about how the mind tricks. I have lots of other experiences in recovery. I've had the experience one time I was working for the Department of Environmental Quality, and I dressed in a coat and tie for that job, and I was a senior level manager, and I was in charge of physical security and a number of other things. But anyway, I got a call early one morning to come to the director's conference room right away. And so my head went up, and I thought, well, this is, now I can demonstrate how important I really am to this organization. So up I go, and when I get to the director's conference room, the executive secretary says to me, there is an insect in the director's conference room. We would like for you to capture it and escort it out of the building. So in my coat and tie, although I'm grumbling the whole way, I went in to get this insect and capture it and get it out of the building. So I'm on the 6th floor. I capture it. Luckily, I got it in a clear plastic cup and on a saucer so I could see it. And I'm walking out through the building, through the elevator, all at rush hour. I'm hoping no one will see me, but of course that's impossible. I'm going to see everyone. And I'm walking out through the lobby of the building, and I've got this cup and saucer, and I'm looking at this bug, and the bug looks like it's dying in my hand. And I'm thinking, man, I might as well just throw this thing in the waste bath. This is a waste of time. But something about me, something within me, I should say, caused me to keep walking. I finally went out the front door, and when I got out the front door, I lifted that cup off that saucer, and that nearly dead bug just took off. And it was just jubilant. I could see it flying for the longest time, just bouncing. And the thought came to me that there really are no small jobs in God's universe. Because all that time, I thought that I was capturing a bug. But that bug knew that I was saving its life. And you could tell it by its reaction to its new freedom. And I only tell you that to tell you that's not the kind of thinking that drove me for years to keep destroying my life and the lives of others. And that only happens through this active witness, this reduction of self that I get to share of myself with you. And my experience with this Creator who dwells within that I discovered as a result of Cocaine Anonymous's 12-step process. And so I witnessed that to you in case you didn't know why. Sometimes we come to 12 steps and we're sober now and that's good enough. The reason I continue in the manner of living is because it gives me freedom. I don't want to be sober in a world I'm not free. I've proven it. But the other reason that you might want to consider the 12-step process is it isn't really power for me not to use when I don't want to. It's power for me not to use when I do want to. And I learned that through the experience. That in time, sometimes things get tough, opportunities show up. I hear it all the time, it was free, what could I do? I mean, I hear the silliest things given who we are and how we get here. But the steps have given me a certain level of clarity and sanity that even if I wanted to block my consciousness temporarily, I couldn't do that to the people I've committed to show up for through the next week. You know what I mean? I've got a sense of purpose in my life, and that purpose drives my life. I don't know that I can add any more to that, so I think I'll be quiet, but thanks for letting me have the opportunity to witness to you.
If you would like to purchase a CD of this speaker or previous speaker, a big book, a 12 and 12, or Hope, Faith, and Courage, please see our CD chair. This meeting...
Hi, Sam.
This meeting is a home group. If you would like to become a home group member, we meet the third Sunday of every month directly following the meeting. Can we get one more big round of applause for our And we will now close the meeting with a prayer of the speaker's choice.
Let this circle represent what we can do together that we could not do by ourselves. After a moment of silent meditation for those suffering inside and outside the rooms, particularly for those who died while we were having this meeting. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.